Hello, my friends. So, in this lesson, let's learn about the fundamentals of JavaScript. Okay. So, let me go to my notes and let's go to fundamentals. So, friends, what is JavaScript? So, JavaScript is one of the most popular and widely used programming languages. And giants like Netflix, Walmart, PayPal, they are building entire applications with JavaScript. Okay. So what can you do with JavaScript? You can add interactivity to web pages. You can make a complete web or mobile app with JavaScript. You can build desktop applications. You can build real-time networking applications, command line tools, games, backend services, databases. Everything can be built using JavaScript. Second question, where does JavaScript run? Okay, so JavaScript was originally designed just to run on browsers. Okay, so every browser ships with a JavaScript engine which can read the JavaScript file and execute the JavaScript file. But there are platforms like Node and Deno which can execute JavaScript literally anywhere. Okay, it can, so now we can make backend applications, servers, desktop applications, everything using JavaScript using either Node or Deno. So basically, browsers and Node, they provide a runtime environment for our JavaScript code. Okay. One thing that confuses people is what is the difference between ES or ECMAScript and JavaScript. So friends, ECMAScript is just a specification. Okay. It's just a set of rules. And JavaScript is a programming language that conforms to those specifications. Okay. So there is an organization called ECMA, which is responsible for defining some standards. Okay. So in 1997, it started. And in 2015, there was a biggest release in the history of JavaScript, which is called ES6. And in the ES6, several new features and syntaxes were added to JavaScript. And similarly, after 2015, every year, the JavaScript is getting better and better and better. Okay, so ECMA is an organization which is responsible for defining standards, and JavaScript is a programming language that conforms to those standards. Okay. Okay. Now let's write some JavaScript code in the browser. Okay. So here in my desktop, I'll create a new folder called maybe mastering JavaScript. Okay. And then I'll open this folder in VS Code. So I have it open in my VS Code. I'll create a file called index.html. Okay. What will I do here is I'll type exclamation, enter, and I'll get a boilerplate for an HTML file. Okay. So basically, it has HTML. Inside HTML, we have head and body. Okay. Now, this is a simple HTML file. Okay. What can I do is I can give it a title, mastering JavaScript. Friends, I like you to do this as well. Okay. And in the body, I'll type a heading and I'll type maybe mastering JavaScript. Okay. And I'll save it. And what will I do now is I'll open a browser instance. Okay. I'll open a browser and I'll start the live server. Okay. So I'll open with live server. And what will it do is that this JavaScript is, I can see this JavaScript in action here in my browser. And what is the beauty of live server, that if I make any changes, okay, then it automatically gets refreshed. The browser automatically gets refreshed as soon as I make any changes. Okay, so it's watching for changes, which is a very good thing, which saves a lot of time. Okay, and you have to install an add-on to get this live server. So if so, I have already installed this live server. Okay, and once you are done with this live server, you this is a self-descriptive one, very simple. You can you can open live server either by uh, you know clicking a live server icon down here, or what my preferred way of doing it is to go to command, you know and then just open the live server. Okay, so this is really simple, nothing fancy here. Okay, so I've started the live server so that it watches for changes and I can see the result here. Okay, so we have index.html file. Now we need a JavaScript file, right? So we will create a JavaScript file, and I may name it script.js, for example. Here I'll write a simple log statement. I'll log something to the console, maybe hello from mastering JavaScript, maybe. Okay. Now I need to include this script file in the HTML file. Okay. So how can I include it? I can include it with the script tag, and in the source I can type script.js. And if I save it and look at the console by right-clicking inspect in the browser, I'll get the console log hello from mastering.js. So how this works, friends, I have a script. This script has some JavaScript. When I include this script in my HTML using the script tag, so whenever the page loads, this script is parsed and executed by the JavaScript engine in my browser. So here in this case, I'm using my browser to run a JavaScript code. Okay, excellent. So now we have our script, our JavaScript file, and browser where we can check if our JavaScript code is working as expected. The first concept that I want to discuss here in this video is variables. Okay, so you can compare variables to a very well organized kitchen. Okay, so if you see someone's kitchen which is very well organized, there are different boxes. Okay, every box has some content, and it has a label. It has an identifier through which you can immediately identify that, okay, this box contains salt, this box contains sugar, and this box contains baking powder, for example. Okay, so you have a box, there is something inside the box, and you have a label. Okay, so variables are basically boxes. What you put inside the boxes are called value or data, and you give all the boxes a name, a label. Okay, that variable name is a label that you are putting on the box. And there are three ways to declare a variable in JavaScript. You can use var, you can use let, you can use const. So there are some subtle differences between var, let, and const. We will look into them in great detail, but that's not required for now. Okay, for now, just know that we have three different ways of declaring a variable in JavaScript. We can do that either using var, we can do that using let, we can do that using const. Okay, so we can write something like var first name. So we are declaring a variable. Then we can assign some value to our variable using the equal to sign. So we can say first name equals Vivek, and we can log that name. Okay. So here, if I copy and run, we will see that we get back Vivek in the console. Friends, in order to learn JavaScript, we use console a lot. Okay, so it's easy, right? So whatever we are trying out here, we can check if it's working by just one line of code, which is console.log. Okay, and we will be able to check if our concept, if our logic is working as expected just by logging the variable here in the console. So we have declared a variable called first name. The first name was assigned a value, and we have logged the value, and everything seems to be working fine. Okay, so this was your first variable here. There are some rules which you need to follow. Variable names cannot contain spaces. One thing. Variable names must begin with either a letter or an underscore or a dollar sign, right? Variable names can only contain letters, numbers, underscores, and dollar signs within them. Variable names are case sensitive. So my name with capital N is not equal to my name with a small n. Okay, they both are different variables. And there are certain words which have their special meanings in JavaScript. They are called keywords, and you cannot use them as a variable name. So these are some of the very common sense rules of a variable. Okay. Now, what type of values can be assigned to a variable? So we have this box. What can be put inside that box called variables? So we have primitive values. We have non-primitive values. Okay. Primitive values are string, number, boolean, undefined, null, and big int and symbol. Non-primitive values are objects, arrays, and functions. If you see, I have written here value types and I have written here reference types. Don't worry about that much. We will look into that in the lessons to come. Okay. So it's self-explanatory. Let me quickly go through it. Okay. So for example, I'll declare a variable, say let my var. Okay. Now, I can assign anything to it. For example, my var is equal to Vivek. Vivek is just a string, okay? It is just a sequence of characters. And we have assigned Vivek to my var, and I can log it. And I can see that I get back Vivek, okay? I can assign a number to it. For example, I can assign 35 to it, and I'll get back 35. Okay. I can assign Boolean to it. I can assign true to it. So friends, if we are writing true or false without quotes, it's a Boolean value. But if we put them inside quote, then they become a string value. Okay. So we can assign a Boolean value to our variables. We can assign something called null, an empty value called null. This is a special keyword, and this empty value basically means it's a null. And friends, if you don't assign anything, if you absolutely don't assign anything to it, okay, then JavaScript assigns it a special keyword called undefined. Okay, so you will see that if I'm not assigning anything to I've declared it, but if I'm not assigning it anything, JavaScript auto assigns it undefined. So these are the 5 primary types we'll be working with a lot: string, number, boolean, undefined, and null. Okay, there are 2 more, big int and symbol, that we will look later. So now friends, one thing that JavaScript has a feature called dynamic typing. Okay, so we are not giving it any variable type here. Okay, it depends on the value we assign to this variable. So if I assign a string to my var, if I assign a string here, the type of my var is, let's check it. Type, excuse me, type of my var, if I log it, it's a string. Okay, we have not said to JavaScript anywhere that it's a string, but depending on the type of value we have assigned, it takes the form of a string. Okay, if I assign it a number, for example, I assign it maybe 35, you will see that the type of line number 4 is logging out a number. So this means that the nature of JavaScript variables is dynamic. Okay, so it depends on the type of value that we assign to a variable. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. Now let's look at a couple of non-primitive types. The non-primitive types are objects, arrays, and functions. So objects in programming language are like object in a real world. Okay, so they have properties. And an object essentially is simply a group of related variables. Okay, so let's say we are collecting data for a user. Okay, so we will be requiring, for example, var, let's use anything. Let first name is equal to Vivek. Let last name is equal to Agarwal, for example. Let favorite subject is equal to JavaScript. Okay, so I am collecting some data about a user. Okay, a user of an application or a student of a class or a teacher of a school. So we are collecting some data of a user. So what if we need to collect some data, the same data of another user? So how will we do that? One very bad way to do that is to create new variables for them. So first name 1 is equal to maybe Basam, and the last name 1 could be Ismail, and favorite subject may be TypeScript. Okay, so this is okay. I can create user 1 here like this. I can create user 2 like this. I can create hundreds of users like this, right? But this does not look very scalable, right? A better way is to group the related variables together. Okay, so what we can do is we can create an object, say let user is equal to an object. So we can create an object and it can group the related variables together. So in a key value pair, for example, first name is equal to Vivek and second name is equal to Agarwal, and the third name, the favorite subject could be anything here, for example, JavaScript. Okay, now this is a much better way to group variables together in one place. And we will see several ways of creating objects using the factory functions, using the constructor functions, using the classes. But Essentially, an object groups one, the variables together, and second, the functions together. Okay, so for example, I need a function for every user. Okay, I need a function called function, say user details, for example, details. And what it will do is it will log the first name, it will log the second name, and we may also log the favorite subject. Okay, and so we can group this function which uses these variables. Okay, this function is very closely tied to these variables. We can make them a part of our object, so it can contain something like say user details, which will be a function, and it will simply log out some details about our user. Okay, so now what we can do is we can simply invoke user object dot say user details, and I'll get back what I'm looking for. I can see, yeah, of course, of this object, and I'll see that I get back Vivek Agarwal loves JavaScript. Okay, and this we will look into how this keyword works. Basically, just giving you a little bit of hint that we are using this method, and this method contains the this keyword, and at the call side we are writing user dot say user details, right? So all of these, this points to user here. So basically this dot first name means this user dot first name. Okay, so basically we have grouped variables together and we have grouped function inside the same object. So basically we have methods and properties of the user grouped in one object. The next non-primitive types is an array. And an array is used to store a list of objects. Okay, and this list of object can contain anything. Okay, let's check it. So let's create an array. Let my array is an array, and it can contain a list of literally anything. So it can contain a string, it can contain maybe some numbers, it can contain booleans, it can contain an object, it can contain another array. Okay, it can contain a null, it can contain an undefined. Essentially, array can contain anything, and if you log the array, you will see that we can see all of these are a part of the array. Okay, so this is array. And friends, we will go in a lot of depth of objects, arrays, and functions. Okay, essentially, if you understand objects, arrays, and functions, you have mastered JavaScript. Okay, so this is just an introduction. So I like to follow this style of teaching, which is called the macro first approach. So I give a very high level overview of everything, and then I go into finer details. So this is how our brain processes the information in the best possible way. Okay, first a 5,000 feet overview of the thing. So we have the plot set, the blueprint set, and then we are filling in the micro details, the finer details. Okay, so we will be looking objects, arrays, and functions in great details. Okay, so this is just an introduction. If things are not making 100% sense to you yet, don't worry, they will eventually. Now functions, the third non-primitive type. So function is a set of statements that either perform a task or calculates and returns a value. So functions are callable, they are executable, they can take arguments, they have a set of statements that can do some calculations, that can do some tasks, and they always return a value. Okay, we can explicitly return a value or they implicitly return something, but they always return something. So let's write a very simple example function just for fun. So function say name or function greet. Okay, and it takes in name and a greeting, and what we can do is we can simply log greeting from the name. Okay, so we have created a reusable function. So anytime I want a greeting text which contains a custom greeting and a name, I can use this function. So what can I do is I can invoke the function using the parenthesis, and I can pass in a name. I can pass in a greeting. Okay. And if I save it, I see the greeting here. Okay. So we have declared the function here and we have executed the function here. Okay. If I don't execute it, nothing happens. Okay. It's just a function with some set of instructions which takes in some parameters, right? But in order to execute it, in order to invoke it, we need to execute it using the parenthesis. And inside the parenthesis, we pass in some parameters. So these are functions. Excellent. Great. So in the next lesson, we will move to operators, another very, very important JavaScript concept.